you still have the plastic stock manifold on your Milwaukee 8, I got a little tech tip on what you can do with this thing. What's up guys, Tony from Tucker Speed here. Now that I've given you a tech tip on what to do with that plastic stock manifold, I'm going to show you how to install this S&S 55mm aluminum manifold. As far as parts list goes, it's pretty straightforward. Manifold comes with the O-ring between the manifold and the throttle body. You will need to pick up a couple of intake seals, but that's really all you're going to need as far as parts list. So I'll walk you through what tools you're going to need. I'm going to walk through step by step on how to install this thing. All right, so as far as tool list on this install, it's not a ton. This bike does have an HPI intake, so your tools might be a little bit different in that aspect, but you need a T40 for your fuel tank. Allens, I got 5/32, 3/16, 7/32, and a long ball Allen. You will need that long ball Allen for the intake manifold. The other important one, you're going to need an intake manifold wrench to get those manifold bolts on the back side of the manifold. This is going to be huge. We got a 5mm Allen, and then a T30 and a T25 ratchets. I got a 9/16 wrench to take my horn bracket off. You are going to need a inch-pound torque wrench to put everything back together. I got a couple of impacts and screwdrivers here. Pretty basic stuff. All right, but before we get jumping into this thing, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave us a comment or question below. I guess that's it. If you don't, then I'll kick your dog. Now let's jump into this install. All right, so first step in this process, I'm going to remove the seat, get the gas tank out of the way. So I've got these rear bolts on the manifold loosened, but you can go ahead and just leave them in the head, but I backed them out quite a way so you got some room. The flanges are slotted on the back side, you'll see, so I just leave them there, just no reason to pull them all the way out. So I'm gonna jump over and loosen and remove the bolts on the right side of the bike, and then the manifold should come right out. That. All right, now I got the manifold off of the bike. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the fuel rail and the map sensor, pull these intake flanges off, throw away the old seals. This one's kind of stuck on there. That other one was really loose. It could have been leaking. I'll clean these flanges up really good. We'll want to clean the face, like the flange face on the heads before we go back together. Clean those up really good. So I got a T25 to remove the map sensor here. It's got an O-ring on it. Just want to you don't want to pry on it too hard or you can break it. Just kind of wiggle it back and forth and it'll pop out. This fuel rail is a T30 Torx. So when you pull this fuel rail and the injectors out, you're probably going to have a little bit of fuel leak out. Just throw a rag down. Out with the old. Throw that thing away, take it out back and beat it. We'll get our fuel rail installed back in the new manifold, the map sensor, get the flanges cleaned up, and start putting this thing back together. I'm going to put a little bit of dielectric grease on these O-rings on the injectors. Just helps them slide in a little easier, and then also a little bit on the map sensor. Put a little bit of blue Loctite on these screws. So the fuel rail has like two little nubs that are going to line up with a notch on the manifold. Just want to make sure that that sits nice and flush. I've already kind of cleaned up the faces of the flange sealing surface on the heads. I kind of cleaned up and Scotch-Brighted the inside of the flanges there. Get these kind of on there and ready to go in place. So I'll try and turn this so you can see it a little bit here. I see a lot of people make this mistake where they put these flanges and seals together incorrectly. So you'll see that the flange has kind of a taper to it, and then so does the seal, and they kind of fit together, the two tapered faces facing each other. So it's basically, you want to put the flange on the manifold first with the taper facing out, and then the tapered side going into that kind of tapered valley that creates on the manifold. Again, with the flange first and then the seal. And I'll push that seal all the way back in there, so as I'm sliding it between the heads, the seal doesn't catch anything. You kind of want these, so you'll want the slotted side on the back side of the manifold kind of facing down on the two bolts that are left in the heads. Just make it a little easier. But main thing is you don't want that rubber seal to catch the edge of the port as you're sliding it by there. So try and really keep it pushed past the edge of the manifold there. So this is ready to go back on the bike now. All right, so once you kind of get it in place, you're gonna wanna line up the slotted hole on the back side of the flange with the bolts that are already started. I think I'm there, but I'm just gonna walk around and see. So yeah, everything you can see is pretty loose in there right now. I'm just gonna kind of run these bolts in just a little bit to help hold it in place. And then we'll get these top bolts started. So I got all 4 bolts started and snug, but not tight. I can still move the manifold up and down a little bit, and this is an important step. We want to go ahead and install the throttle body and the backing plate of whatever intake you're using to get this to line up properly before we tighten down these 4 manifold screws. Before we put the throttle body on, we want to put this throttle body wire harness kind of tucked back in there behind the manifold so that it's down below here. So the manifold's still loose. All right, so we're ready to throw the throttle body on. I'm just gonna put a little dielectric in this O-ring groove just to help hold the O-ring in place. It doesn't want to pop out. We want to thank our sponsors, the Law Tigers. The Law Tigers are motorcycle accident attorneys. Scott and his crew across the nation ride, and they understand our culture. If you've been in a motorcycle accident, the Law Tigers should be your first call.
Give us a call, we'd love to help you out.
All right, so the manifold is still loose. I got the throttle body on. I'm gonna go ahead and torque them. Torque those to 50 inch-pounds. So at this point, I still have the manifold loose. You can see it's still loose inside the flange. They're snug, but just loose. Go ahead and get the backing plate installed. Got a gasket on there already. This bike has an HPI intake, so this might look a little bit different than what you're dealing with, but the intake's pretty straightforward. Get some Loctite on these screws. So this is where that part is critical, getting your breather bolts to line up. If the manifold was locked down, you wouldn't be able to get these bolts to line up properly. You want to get these in. Now that the backing plate is locked in place, I can go ahead and torque the manifold bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and snug them down first, and then I'll torque them. Torque on these is 150 inch-pounds. All right, so I got the manifold torqued, the backing plate is torqued. I'm gonna go ahead and hook up all my sensors now. So I'm gonna hook up the injectors. Now the injector wires, you don't wanna get crossed. And you're working with a Milwaukee 8, the connectors are color-coded. The black connector is the rear cylinder. I always just remember it as black is back. And then the gray one is on the front cylinder. So I got injectors plugged in, get my T-map sensor plugged in, kind of push in the safety lock there. I could have plugged this in before I put the backing plate on, but you can still get to it. Plug in the throttle body, clip the safety latch back in. I'm gonna move back over to the other side and install that horn bracket. All right, that is the quick install on the S&S 55mm Manifold. S&S claims that it does add horsepower, maybe a little bit. I think the real reason for changing it out is getting rid of the plastic one. The plastic one, we've seen a lot of it, just a lot of warpage from heat, things like that, creating intake seal leaks. So I think even on stock motors, I think it's a must. Definitely if you're starting to build, you know, a 124 or larger, doing cams, stuff like that, I definitely think it's a must-have. That product is available at tuckerspeed.com. There is a link in the description below that will take you directly to it. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos, and we'll see you on the next one.